Hello, everyone. Have a great day. Today,
I'll continue the story of Jack and Single Life.
follow more heartwarming love stories.
The road out of the village was quiet that morning. Too quiet. Jack sat in the back seat of the black car as it slowly moved down the narrow mountain road. The driver focused on the path ahead, while the distant village behind them grew smaller with every passing minute. He should have felt relieved. That was the plan. Return to the city, return to the company, return to the life that had always been waiting for him. But instead, something inside his chest felt heavier with every kilometer. Jack leaned his head slightly against the window. Outside, the mountains stretched endlessly under the pale morning sky. Villages passed by, fields of crops, old wooden houses, but none of them were the one he had just left. None of them were where she was. Single Life. The name alone was enough to bring back the image he had tried to push away all morning. Her standing in the doorway, her voice when she said he should leave, the quiet strength in her eyes when she rejected him, not cruelly, but firmly, as if she had already decided what their ending would be. Jack closed his eyes, and suddenly, he heard another voice in his memory. A smaller one. "Uncle Jack, are you leaving?" Beethoven. The boy's face appeared in his mind so clearly that Jack's chest tightened, the small hands holding his sleeve, the trust in his eyes. Jack opened his eyes again and looked forward. "Stop the car." The driver blinked slightly. "Sir? Stop." The car slowed immediately and pulled to the side of the road. The driver turned slightly in his seat. "Is something wrong, Mr. Jack?" Jack stared at the empty road ahead. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he spoke quietly. "Turn around." The driver hesitated. "Back to the village?" "Yes." "But the board meeting." "I know." The driver studied his face carefully. Jack rarely changed decisions once they were made, but something about his expression now was different, determined, quiet, unmovable. So the driver nodded slowly. "Yes, sir." The car turned around, and for the first time since leaving, Jack felt the tightness in his chest ease slightly. Back in the village, Single Life was trying to move on. That was what she had told herself she would do. The morning routine continued the same as always. She opened the small market stall near the edge of the village, arranging vegetables in neat rows, while Beethoven played nearby with the wooden car Jack had fixed. Everything looked normal, but nothing felt normal. Every few minutes, she caught herself glancing toward the road, the same road Jack had taken when he left. It was ridiculous. She had been the one who told him to go. She had been the one who said the distance between them was too great. So why did the silence feel so loud now? "Mom?" Beethoven said suddenly. "Yes?" "Do you think Uncle Jack will come back?" The question hit her harder than she expected. She kept arranging the vegetables carefully. "I don't know," she said. The boy looked down at his toy. "I hope he does," he murmured. Single Life's hands slowed, then stopped, but she didn't answer, because hope was exactly what she had been trying to avoid. The sound of a car engine reached the village just after noon. It was unfamiliar. Cars rarely came here. Several villagers stepped outside their homes, curious. Single Life didn't notice at first. She was busy weighing vegetables for a customer. But Beethoven heard it immediately. He ran toward the road. "Mom, a car!" Single Life looked up automatically and froze. The black car rolled slowly into the village. Dust rose behind it as it moved down the narrow path. Her heart skipped once, hard, because she recognized it instantly. The same car, the same one that had taken Jack away that morning. The car stopped near the market stall. For a moment, no one moved. Then the door opened. Jack stepped out. The villagers watched quietly. Single Life stood completely still, because the last thing she had expected was for him to come back. Jack's eyes found her almost immediately, as if the entire village had disappeared and only one person remained. Single Life. Neither of them spoke. The distance between them was only a few meters, but it felt heavier than the mountains around them. Finally, she said softly, "You shouldn't be here." Jack walked closer. "I know." "Then why did you come back?" The answer came without hesitation. Because leaving felt wrong. Single Life looked away briefly. You have responsibilities, she said. A life that doesn't belong here. Jack nodded. Yes. Then go back to it. He shook his head. I will. Her eyes snapped back to him. What? But not before I see you again, he said calmly. Single Life felt her chest tighten. You shouldn't do this. Why? Because it will make things harder. Jack studied her expression carefully. For who? She didn't answer. Jack's voice softened slightly. Single Life. I'm not asking for anything today. Then why come back? He paused, then said quietly, Because I needed you to know something. Her heart beat faster. What? Jack looked directly into her eyes. That I didn't leave because you told me to. The words hung in the air between them. Single Life felt the ground beneath her shift again. You left this morning, she said. Yes. And now you're here. Yes. Why? Jack's voice lowered slightly. Because if I'm going to walk away, I want it to be my decision. The honesty in his tone made her chest ache. Jack. But before she could finish, Beethoven ran forward suddenly. Uncle Jack! The boy threw his arms around Jack's waist. Jack instinctively lifted him again, just like the day before. Beethoven laughed happily. I knew you would come back. Jack smiled faintly. Did you? Yes. The child leaned closer and whispered proudly, I told Mom you would. Jack glanced at Single Life. Her expression softened for just a moment. Then the worry returned. Because every second Jack stayed here, the situation became more complicated, more dangerous, more real. Jack set Beethoven down gently. Then he turned back to Single Life. I won't stay long, he said. You should leave now. Jack shook his head. I came back for one reason. What reason? Jack took a slow breath. To tell you that I'm not finished yet. Single Life frowned slightly. Finished with what? Jack's eyes held hers. With us. The word made her heart stumble. Jack, you believe the distance between us is too big, he continued calmly. It is. Then I'll prove you wrong. Single Life shook her head slowly. You don't understand. Jack smiled faintly. Then help me understand. The determination in his voice frightened her more than anything else, because this wasn't the Jack she thought she knew. This was someone who had made a decision and wasn't planning to turn back. Across the road, a villager whispered quietly to another, Who is that man? No one answered, because the truth was still hidden. For now. But far away, in a tall glass building in the city, someone had already noticed that Jack had disappeared again, and this time, they were coming to find him. The afternoon passed slower than usual. Jack didn't leave immediately. He helped Single Life close the small market stall, carried the baskets of vegetables back to the house, and fixed the loose latch on the wooden gate as if he had never left that morning. The villagers watched quietly. Some of them whispered. A man like Jack, someone who arrived in a luxury car, didn't belong in a place like this. Yet there he was, hammer in hand, fixing a gate like any other villager. Single Life noticed the stairs too, and every glance made the knot in her chest tighter. You should go before it gets dark, she said while placing vegetables inside the house. Jack leaned against the wooden post. I said I wouldn't stay long. You've already stayed too long. Jack smiled slightly. That sounds like you want me to leave. Single Life didn't smile back. I'm trying to protect you. Jack frowned. From what? Single Life gestured toward the road where the black car was parked. From your own world. Jack followed her gaze, then looked back at her. You think my world is that easy to escape? No, she said quietly. That's exactly why you should go back to it. Inside the house, Beethoven was playing with his wooden car on the floor. When Jack stepped in, the boy immediately ran toward him. Uncle Jack, look! He held up a drawing. 3 stick figures. A small one, a taller one, and another one beside them. Jack crouched down. "What is this?" "My family," Beethoven said proudly. Jack studied the drawing. The small figure had messy hair. "That's you," the boy said. Jack nodded. "And this?" "That's Mom." Jack pointed to the third figure. "And this one?" Beethoven grinned. "That's you." Jack felt something shift inside his chest again. "Me?" "Yes," the boy said simply. "Because you're always here." The words were innocent, but they landed heavily. From the doorway, Single Life had heard everything. Her fingers tightened around the wooden frame. Because that was exactly the problem. Jack had become part of their small world, and the longer he stayed, the harder it would be to let him go. Outside, Jack's driver stood beside the car, checking his phone. A message appeared on the screen. "Chairwoman, where is Jack?" The driver hesitated. He looked toward the small house, then typed a reply carefully. He returned to the village. 3 dots appeared almost immediately. Then another message came. "Send me the location." The driver's expression changed, because he knew exactly what that meant. And it was not good. Back inside the house, Jack stood near the small wooden table. Single Life placed 2 bowls of rice down. "You should eat before you leave," she said. Jack sat quietly. For a few minutes, they ate in silence, the same simple meal they had shared many times before. But this time, something in the air felt different, heavier, more fragile. Finally, Jack spoke. "I meant what I said earlier." Single Life didn't look up. "About what?" "About not being finished." She set her chopsticks down slowly. "Jack, I know you think the distance between us is too big," he continued. "It is. Then let me try to cross it." Single Life looked at him now. Her eyes were tired. "People like you don't cross those lines," she said softly. "Why not?" "Because sooner or later, your world will come looking for you." As if summoned by her words, the sound of a phone vibrating broke the silence. Jack glanced down. His phone screen lit up. One name appeared. Mother. Jack's jaw tightened slightly. Single Life noticed. "You should answer," she said quietly. Jack stared at the phone. The vibration stopped, then started again. Another call, another, and another. Finally, he picked it up. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was calm. Too calm. "Where are you?" Jack didn't answer immediately. "You already know," he said. "Yes," his mother replied, "and I'm disappointed." Jack leaned back slightly. "I told you I needed time." "You said a few days," she said. "You disappeared for weeks." Jack's voice lowered. "I'm coming back." "When?" Jack glanced toward the small room where Beethoven was still playing. "Soon." There was a brief silence. Then his mother spoke again. "You're not alone there, are you?" Jack didn't reply. He didn't need to, because she already knew. "I warned you about attachments," she continued quietly. Jack's eyes darkened. "They're not a problem." "They will be." Jack's voice hardened. "They're not yours to decide." Another pause. Then his mother said something that made the air in the room suddenly colder. "I'm already on my way." Jack sat up straight. "What?" "I'll see you tonight." The call ended. Single Life watched him carefully. "What happened?" Jack didn't hide the truth. "My mother is coming." Single Life's face went pale. "When?" "Tonight." The words hit her like cold water. Everything she feared was happening faster than she expected. "You need to leave before she gets here," she said immediately. Jack shook his head. "No." Single Life's voice rose slightly. "Jack, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly." "Then go." Jack looked directly at her. "I'm not running away from this." Single Life's chest tightened. "You're not the one who will suffer the consequences," she said. Jack stood up slowly. "You think I would let anything happen to you?" "You don't control your world," she replied. "And neither do I." The truth in her voice was sharp, because she had seen how powerful people solved problems, by removing the ones who caused them. And right now, She and Bei Tom were the problem. Outside, the sky above the mountains began turning dark. Clouds gathered slowly. The wind picked up. Jack stepped outside and looked toward the distant road. Somewhere beyond those hills, another car was already moving toward them. Inside that car was the one person who had never lost control over his life, his mother. And when she arrived, the quiet life Jack had built here would no longer be a secret. Behind him, Bei Tom ran out of the house. "Uncle Jack!" Jack turned. The boy ran straight into his arms. Jack lifted him without thinking. Bei Tom laughed happily. "You're not leaving again, right?" Jack held him for a moment longer than usual. His gaze moved toward the road again, then back to the child in his arms. And for the first time, Jack understood something clearly. The moment his mother arrived would be the moment he had to choose between two completely different lives.